All right, guys, this is it. This is the video you've been waiting for. Today, we are going to take a deep dive into every single Trans Am used on the show. We're going to tell you from the least number of appearances to the most number of appearances. How many kit cars were used, where they came from, where they are now, if they still exist, and which car do you think, which Trans Am do you think had the most appearances in the show? I think you might be surprised. So stick with us. This is an episode you do not want to miss. All right, guys, this is the video you've been waiting for. We've had so many people over the years ask us about the Knight Rider cars. Which ones survived, which ones didn't, how many were there, what were their purposes, where did the studio get them, all of that. So we decided to put together one really cool video on all of the identifiable Trans Ams used in the show, where they came from, when they were used on the show, how many episodes they were used in the show, what options did they come with, if we know that, and really what happened to them all. So I've talked about little bits and pieces of this in previous videos throughout the years we've been doing this channel. And Universal Studios was given 3 cars initially to film the pilot presentation, I should say. They were given a 4th car to film the rest of the pilot, and they pretty much had 4 cars for most of season 1 until the very end of season 1, whenever they had kind of an influx of new Trans Ams. And that influx came courtesy of a train derailment. Now, we've also covered the train derailment in other videos, but just to kind of put everything together in this one video, I want to go over a little bit about this train derailment. And really, at some point in the hopefully not too distant future, we're going to do a full video on specifically the train derailment. But in November of 1982, Universal Studios actually had something amazing happen to them. It was an accident. It was this train derailment. So a train load of brand new 1983 Firebirds and Trans Ams, and Camaros too, had just left the Van Nuys assembly plant in Van Nuys, California. It was heading north to deliver these cars to dealerships. Well, it was unusually rainy one night in this small central California town, and the rail bed became soft from all the rain. Well, when the train went over it, it collapsed the rail bed, causing these cars the train cars to crash, to fall on their sides. So Pontiac really didn't know what to do with these cars. They couldn't legally sell them since they'd been in accidents, so they were going to just destroy them. But instead of just doing that, they ended up working out a deal with Universal Studios where they'd give Universal, we don't know the exact number that they gave to Universal. I think it's right around a dozen Firebirds and Trans Ams to use as stunt cars for KITT. And the deal was, we'll give you these cars, but whenever the show ends, you need to destroy these cars. They can never be on the road. This train derailment also provided a lot of the Firebirds you see in the Fall Guy. And I'm sure some of the Camaros that were in this accident too went on to be like nondescript stunt cars and things like that. So we've got this influx late season 1 and early season 2. We see a lot of new Trans Ams come into the picture. And we've done our best to to identify each car. But there's this period of the show from about Nobody Does It Better through, let me see here, Blind Spot. All right, so we've got 2 late season 1 episodes, Nobody Does It Better, Short Notice. And then we've got the first, I don't know, let me see, 6 episodes of season 2 in the production order. So we've got Return to Cadiz, Ring of Fire, Merchants of Death, Big Iron, Brothers Keeper, Goliath, and Blind Spot. We can see in those episodes that most of these train derailment cars were in those, 8 episodes. Now, some of the train derailment cars survived past those 8 episodes and were actually used throughout the rest of the series. But there seems to be this odd time with those 8 episodes where these train wreck cars, some of them were used like once or twice or 3 times and we never see them again. It's really kind of bizarre. So there's a lot of mystery surrounding that small time period in the show's production. One of the ways that we can identify these cars, I mean, there's a lot of different ways, but one of the ways we identify them are the production call sheets, the daily production reports that list the cars that were on set for a given day. Now, we've got a ton of these call sheets, but unfortunately, we're missing ones for that time period for the filming of those episodes we just mentioned. So if you're watching and you have production notes or call sheets from any of those 8 episodes, let us know. We'd be greatly interested in taking a peek at those. Anyways, so you'll see here whenever we start going through the cars, we're going to go through them from the least used to the most used. And you're going to see at the start here, there's kind of some question marks, some assumptions being made, a lot of like 1 episode cars. So just kind of bear with us. This we're kind of treating this video as maybe the first iteration, and as we get more data on those initial cars that were used in those first 8 episodes that we've talked about, we'll probably revise this. But really, once we pass the filming of Blind Spot and get into the rest of season 2 and season 3 and season 4, we've got a really, really good grasp on all of the cars used. So things will become a little bit clearer. All right. So a couple other things I wanted to mention before we kind of get into each one of the cars. So Universal Studios, they picture this. You're at Universal Studios, you've got a dozen or more identical black Trans Ams. You need to have some way to identify the cars, some unique value, almost like a VIN number, but not a VIN number. Universal Studios assigned these cars an in-house inventory control number. And whenever a car with a specific number was disposed of or not used anymore, Universal would recycle that inventory number for another vehicle. And it doesn't have to necessarily be Knight Rider. It could be, a background car on Airwolf. That number, that car was disposed, became available. It became a car on the A-Team or something like that. So it's not series specific. But one of the other things we've tried to do is identify which cars, like physical Trans Ams, were replaced but kept the same inventory number. And that kind of helps build this whole picture of how many Trans Ams were actually used in the show. Now, I know there have been reports and people that worked on the show that have said they went through dozens of Trans Ams a season, tons were destroyed, and obviously I wasn't there, right? But in decades of research and evidence, I just don't see how it's possible to have dozens and dozens and dozens of Trans Ams used on the show. And maybe you'll see that once we go through all the different cars here. But the number we're going to present to you as we go through this episode, the number of cars used, I would be very comfortable in saying that we are within 5 to 10 cars of truly accurate. And even 10 cars might be a bit high. I think our final total that you're going to see at the end of this video is within like 5 cars of what they actually had throughout the 4 years on the show. So one of the other reasons I wanted to put this together is because we've seen over the years people popping up with their replicas claiming that they own an original car. Even people that have purchased cars from George Barris that George Barris built. And they are assuming, or were told, maybe by someone that it was used in the show when in fact it wasn't. So we kind of want to set the record straight here and kind of lay out everything we know about the cars and hopefully put to rest all of these other, replicas out there with people claiming that they're original when they actually aren't. All right, anything else I missed on here? No, I think we've covered everything on my notes here. So let's go ahead and start digging into these cars. Like I said, we're going to start with the least used cars, and we're going to work our way up to see which car was used the most as kit in the 4 years the show was on the air. This kit made its first and only appearance in Season 2's Ring of Fire, playing one of the many dirty versions of the car throughout the episode. This 1983 model is one of the many cars obtained from the now infamous train derailment that happened in late 1982. Details around this particular car are few and far between, but we are able to see that it is a T-top, most likely did not have fog lights behind those fog light grills, and is most likely a Trans Am. Now I say most likely a Trans Am because while the car has a Trans Am hood and a Trans Am fenders, and we think Trans Am stone guards, we don't get a good enough look at the rest of the car to know if this was a true Trans Am or just a dressed up Firebird or Firebird SE. Now, while it's possible this car appeared again in the series, we can't 100% confirm it. So for now, we're calling this a one-episode car. Now, sadly, this car no longer exists, either being destroyed during the filming of the series or shortly after its conclusion. Now, it's certainly possible that this next car is actually not a different car, but in fact the same one we just covered as car number 1. Again, we don't get a close enough look at the details on this car to be able to know 100% for sure. Now, I promise you later on in this episode, as we get to the more well-known cars, there's not going to be such a gray area. All we see here is that it's a T-top with a non-defrost rear hatch, which I think was pretty common for the cars that came out of the Van Nuys plant in Southern California. A lot of them didn't have the rear defrost. And again, this car also has a Trans Am hood, as we can see from this profile shot. So regardless of the uncertainty around this kit, we are quite certain that it's another 1983 train wreck car. So you know what happened to the 83 train wreck cars, right? Unfortunately, they all had to be destroyed. It was contractually obligated by Pontiac. So this car no longer exists. Do you have call sheets or production notes for any of these episodes? If so, we would love to hear from you, like seriously. You may just hold the answers to some of the questions we've had for a very long time. Email us at nightriderhistorians@gmail.com and let's chat. Is it really fair to call this next car a kit? Well, of course it is. While it never received any of the unique parts that make kit, front nose, dashboard, things like that, taillight blackout, it was used on screen in the original series to depict our favorite supercar. So, it's a kit to us. This was yet another 1983 car pulled from the train accident in late 1982. Our guess is that this car was damaged more than most of the Trans Ams from that incident, which is probably why it was never converted into kit and was sacrificed for this one scene in this one episode. Interestingly, the teaser for this episode shows more footage of this car than what we see in the actual episode. The episode replaces a lot of the rollover with miniatures. But what can we see? Well, we can see that it's a Trans Am, or again, dressed up as a Trans Am, at least. It's got 1983 seats. Now, those seats were only available in 1983. They're a very specific one-year only seat. It also has a stock 82 through 84 Trans Am front bumper. It has T-tops, and it's got a spoiler. So this is pretty much a stock 1983 Trans Am. The only thing that they did was remove the decals and paint the rockers black, right? If this was a true black and gold Trans Am, it would have had gold decals and gold stripes, and it would have had gold painted along the bottom. But it could have been any color Trans Am, and they could have just spray bombed it black. We don't know. We get just a tiny peek at the underside, but I can't tell if it's an automatic or manual transmission. The picture just isn't sharp enough. Maybe you guys can tell. What do you think? Can you tell if this has a manual transmission or an automatic transmission? So this car, obviously, because it's a train wreck car, it was destroyed. Well, and the fact that we see it destroyed in the episode. So here's yet another car, another 1983 from the train derailment. We only see it in this brief scene from Brother's Keeper, when Michael was racing through the parking garage. Still, we're able to glean a few details about the specs on this car. The car has T-tops and a non-defrost rear hatch, as well as a completely stock dashboard and rear cargo privacy screen. Interestingly, this car was also outfitted with a camera tow bar, which lends us to believe that it was used for some interior filming shots as well. Unfortunately, it's fairly dark in the parking garage scene, making it hard to see much more detail. Once again, visually it looks like a Trans Am, but in reality it too could be a dress-up Firebird or a Firebird SE. All three of those cars were available during the 1982, 83, and 84 years. This car, much like all the other train wreck cars, was destroyed during the filming of the series. Alright, well, if you like Brother's Keeper, we've got yet another one for you. Car number 5. This one also is a one-episode car, also from Brother's Keeper. We do see both interior and exterior shots of this car. And while it could potentially be the same as Car 4, the one we just covered, this car sports a Knight Rider fiberglass dash shell over the stock Trans Am dash. So, at least for now, we're going to separate it out into its own car. It's interesting that they used this car for insert shots, as by season 2 they actually had a dedicated insert car that they would normally use. So I'm thinking maybe that insert car was, out for maintenance or some sort of repairs during the filming of the scenes on this day. We do see the car has an overhead console, and some of the headliner is covered in gaff tape. We also get a look at the seatbelt trim on the ceiling, and this design of trim didn't start until 1983. You can tell by that little extension piece that goes behind the speaker cover. 1982 seatbelt trim was just a rectangular piece that covered the opening of the seatbelt hole in the headliner itself. Got it? Good. So this is also a 1983 Trans Am from the train derailment, and because of that, guess what? Spoiler alert, it was destroyed during filming as well. Jumping ahead a few episodes in Season 2, we've got yet another interesting Trans Am, another one from the train derailment. I know, it's starting to sound like a broken record, right? I promise you there will be some variety coming soon. So this car is used in one brief scene only in the episode Nightmares, and we can see it has T-tops, rear defrost, no camera tow bar, and the right-hand sun visor is pulled down. It also has fog light grills and no skid plate. Interestingly, it also appears to have its factory windshield with the tint across the top. So for those of you who aren't familiar, whenever you buy a car, even today, there's a tinted piece, a tinted strip across the top of the windshield to help keep the sun from glaring in your eyes. But for the Knight Rider cars, they had all their windshields swapped out for a completely clear glass windshield, so it would not obstruct the camera. It wouldn't obstruct the camera's view of the actors inside. But especially in these early season 2 episodes, a lot of those cars never received the new windshield, at the time they were filming. Anyways, much like the train wreck cars, this one destroyed as well. And finally, the 7th kit in our list, and the last one to be featured, it would seem, in only one episode. We believe this is a 1983 train wreck car, and one of the first to appear on the series. It was in the second to last episode, Nobody Does It Better. It's most likely a Trans Am, but again, could be a Firebird SE as well, kind of dressed up to look like a TA. But we can see that it does have the dual resonator exhaust underneath the car, which tells us that it wasn't a base Firebird. It was either a Firebird SE or a Trans Am. This episode was filmed only a few months after the train derailment, believe it or not. It's a T-top car, and it, at least in the filming of it, has PMD seats. They could have easily swapped PMDs in for the 1983 seats that might have been in there, but PMD seats were available as an option in 1983. It also doesn't have an overhead console, no tow bar, and it still has its right-hand seatbelt. A non-defrost rear hatch adorns the back of the car, along with a stock Trans Am dashboard, fog lights, and a small stunt wheel. But much like the other train wreck cars, this one too, destroyed. All right, time to introduce a little bit of variety here. It's time to move to a kit car that was actually around for more than one episode. Like 2 episodes. Unfortunately, like some of the other cars we've covered so far, we only see this car for a few brief moments in each of the 2 episodes it was in. In production order, this car first appeared in Return to Cadiz and showed up again in the episode filmed immediately after Cadiz, Ring of Fire. We don't know too much about this car other than it's a T-top with no overhead console. In fact, the factory dome light can be seen in Cadiz, but is removed for Ring of Fire. It's got what I like to call a Knight Rider half dash, meaning it had a fiberglass Knight Rider dash top piece to cover the stock Trans Am dash, but no gauge face. The left-hand seatbelt is gone, and it's got a non-defrost rear hatch. The giveaway that this is the same car comes when you see the steering wheels. In both episodes, there's a piece of gaff tape covering the hole in the wheel, and the imperfections on the shaft of the wheel and the waves in the gaff tape on the front of the wheel match in both cars. Once again, this car would have been from the train wreck and was destroyed during the filming of the series. So one thing I wanted to mention, when we say the car was destroyed during filming, it's really hard to say what stunt exactly struck the fatal blow. We just know it didn't survive to be crushed when the show ended years later. Our next kit, we're calling car number 9, appeared in 4 episodes during those early season 2 episodes. It premiered in Return to Cadiz, the first episode filmed for season 2. In this episode, we see it's a 1983 train wreck T-top car, most likely a Trans Am with 1983 seats, no camera tow bar, and both the left and right seatbelts still intact. It also has a factory windshield with the tint across the top like we just mentioned in that other car, a stock dashboard, and a rear defrost hatch. It then appeared again 2 episodes later, production-wise at least, in Merchants of Death, where we see a train wreck car perform a ski mode for the very first time. The rear seat has a solid 1-piece backrest, but in a 2-tone fabric, a light tan and a dark tan, something that was only done for 1983 cars produced early in the model year. At some point, they switched to a split backrest, a 2-piece backrest with the 2-tone. That's how we know it's a little bit different. The car's biggest moment came a few episodes later during the filming of what would be the season premiere, Goliath. For this episode, the Knight Rider crew bent the hood, tore up the passenger side, and otherwise dirtied up the car to depict Kitt in his post-Goliath confrontation condition. These scenes show that the car may have been painted red from the factory, but at the very least the car had a red passenger door as evidenced by some shots in this episode. You may think this was the end of this torn up Kitt car, but no, it actually appeared again in the very next episode to be produced, Blind Spot. The rear quarter damage on the passenger side was half-heartedly repaired, but you can see evidence of a large patch placed over the affected area, and the door, fender, and hood were replaced. It even looks like they may have put a non-T-top headliner in this car, despite the fact that it was a T-top car, but who cares? No one's going to notice that, right? After this episode, this car seems to have disappeared, most likely trashed for good due to the body damage. And here we are at car number 10. Well, technically it's half a car. We jump all the way to season 4 for this one. For this last year of the show, the producers decided to introduce 2 new versions of KITT, the Super Pursuit car and the convertible car. For the latter, 2 cars were built, a fully drivable permanent convertible and a half car mounted to a boat trailer that could actually transform. Since this half car version was built from a real Trans Am, we're counting it as a KITT car. Custom fabricator Dennis Braid, under the watchful eye of car customizer George Barris, took a gutted shell of a white hardtop Firebird or Trans Am and built this boat trailer half car for the show. So details are kind of scarce on the source of this shell. It was either from the train wreck or a shell possibly purchased from a local salvage yard. We do know it was white, it was a hardtop, with automatic transmission, power windows, and air conditioning. The trailer convertible was used anytime the show was filming insert shots of Hasselhoff in the convertible. In fact, this towable convertible half car was used in every episode where we see the full-time, drivable convertible, except one. The fate of this half car is unknown. We know it was around when the series ended, but we have not seen any evidence that it was crushed when the show ended. So is this shell of a KITT still floating around there somewhere? Its fate? Unknown. Alright, now we're really starting to get into the good stuff. I present to you car number 11. Oh, we know so much about this car. We uncovered the VIN years ago, which of course allowed us to unlock all of the original specs on this car from the factory. First appearing in Season 2's Silent Night, this 1983 Trans Am, once again sourced from the train derailment, was one of Knight Rider's very few manual transmission KITT cars. In fact, it might have been the only one. We can't confirm that or not. It was originally a silver Trans Am with black accents and a gray interior, looking very similar to this photo. 14-inch non-turbocast rims, cruise control, engine block heater, trunk release, rear defrost, T-tops, power locks and windows, gas door lock, and more. This car's introduction into the Knight Rider world was the scene in Silent Night when Tino decides to test out KITT's smoke release. One easy way to spot this car in the show is its unique tan A-pillars. You see, when the studio was turning this car into KITT, they spray bombed the interior to include those A-pillars, which never came from the factory in any color other than black. Anyways, the car then returns in the next episode to be produced, A Knight in Shining Armor, where it performs KITT's first, and I think only, reverse turbo boost out at Bronson Canyon near Los Angeles. This manual transmission car then pops up again throughout the first half of Season 3 as a drivable working Trans Am. And then we get to Junkyard Dog. For this episode, the crew needed a car they could sacrifice by gutting it and throwing it into a pit of acid. Well, in reality, like a watery mud. But anyways, stunt coordinator Jack Gill once said how much they hated the manual transmission KITT car, so that no doubt played some role in their decision to use this car for that episode. You may think that after this episode ended, the car was junked. But that was not to be the case with this KITT. The gutted shell sat around while the production finished filming Season 3. For Season 4, the producers decided to build 2 new versions of KITT, one of those versions being the Super Pursuit Mode car. This work was contracted out to car customizer George Barris. To achieve KITT's transformation on screen, Barris actually built 2 SPM cars. One was a full-time SPM car where the extended bits on KITT were permanently welded in place. The other car was a hydraulic version that, while it couldn't drive, was full of hydraulic cylinders, hoses, and pumps to allow KITT to actually transform on screen. To build this car, Barris would need a gutted KITT so he'd have room to fit all of the various pieces needed to make this happen on the inside. Wait a minute, The Knight Rider crew had the perfect car, didn't they? So they gave Barris this gutted kit to transform into the hydraulic SPM car. In fact, you can see this gutted kit outside of Barris's shop shortly before its transformation in the summer of 1985, and you can see the acid-coated rear bumper on the car during its conversion to the SPM car. Technically, this car wasn't filmed for a specific episode, but rather the second unit filmed the transformation on their own, and then that footage became stock footage to be recycled anytime KITT was transforming. Despite this, we'll say the last episode this car was used in was the Season 4 premiere, Night of the Juggernaut. This car did survive to the end of the filming of the series, but it is confirmed to have been crushed shortly after the show ended. Alright, next up is the only kit car to ever start its life owned by a private individual. This 1982 V6 base Firebird left the GM Van Nuys plant as a maroon hardtop and was owned privately for 3 years before being purchased by Barris to convert into the full-time KITT convertible. Interestingly enough, this kit car boasts the lowest VIN number of any of the kit cars. This car was actually built before the 3 cars that they used in the pilot. It was delivered and sold by Nelson Pontiac in El Monte, California in March of 1982, before they even filmed the pilot. As far as equipment goes with this car, it was actually somewhat of a bare bones car. It had automatic transmission, air conditioning, cruise control, rear defrost, power door locks, power windows, and that's for the most part. It had 14-inch steel wheels. It wasn't that exciting of a car whenever it left the assembly line. The car made its debut in Knight Rider in the Season 4 premiere, Night of the Juggernaut, before being used 7 more times throughout Season 4 for a total of 8 appearances. So remember a few minutes ago when we covered the trailer convertible, and I said it was used in only 7 episodes, but this full-time convertible was used in 8 episodes? Well, that's because the trailer convertible was not used in the Season 4 episode Burial Ground, but the full-time convertible was. This is also our first kit car that is confirmed to still be around today. Because this car was not a product placement car, and it was not a train wreck car, but rather it was owned by the studio, it was allowed to survive. As of the recording of this video, the convertible can be publicly seen here in the USA in the Deezerland Museum in Orlando, Florida. In fact, it's parked right beside one of the 6 officially licensed Knight Rider tour cars and one of the Knight Rider 2000 boat cars. Actually, the only Knight Rider 2000 boat car. So if you're in Orlando, Florida, definitely go check it out. Car number 13. Certainly not unlucky, well, except for the fact that it was destroyed. But car number 13 always stood out to me when watching the show, even when I was a kid and I had no idea the history behind this particular car. In our previous videos, we've called this car the stock nose kit, and for good reason. It has, or had, well, a stock Trans Am front nose or bumper on it. But in reality, this car didn't always have this front nose. In fact, it started its Knight Rider journey with a proper KITT front nose, then got this stock nose for Season 3 before seemingly disappearing in Season 4. So let's unpack it all for you right now. Our first confirmed sighting of this car is in Season 2's Speed Demons. It's one of the 2 cars the Knight Rider crew converted into the high-traction drop-down cars. This stock nose KITT, wearing a normal KITT nose at the time, was featured in that episode for most of the long-distance shots whenever you see KITT with his high-traction drop-downs on. The insert shots with Hasselhoff were another car, which we'll get into here in a bit. This is the only known Season 2 appearance of this car. We next see this stock nose KITT again, still not wearing a stock nose, in the first episode produced for Season 3, KITT vs. Car. This car is used for a few brief scenes in the dry lake bed when Karl crashes through a bridge support. The show filmed 2 more episodes after KITT vs. Karl before taking a 2-week hiatus. When they returned to film The Ice Bandits, this car had been converted over to a stock front nose setup. We don't know why, as it doesn't appear the car's front nose was damaged during its crash through the bridge support in KITT vs. Karl. The car goes on to appear in a handful of Season 3 episodes, such as Night of the Drones, Night by a Nose, The 19th Hole, and Night Strike, before seemingly disappearing. Now, we do have some paperwork showing that this car did indeed survive until Season 4, but to date we have not confirmed its appearance in any Season 4 episode. Not much is known about this car's specs, but it was either a Firebird SE or a Trans Am due to its dual resonator exhaust. Obviously had T-tops, but that's about all we know. And while we can't confirm 100%, we are fairly certain, actually 99% certain, this was another 1983 Trans Am from the train derailment, and thus it was destroyed at some point either during Season 4 or after the show ended. Well, I kind of have a soft spot for our next car, what we'll call number 14. And it could be because this very car is currently less than 100 feet where I'm recording this video at this very moment. Yes, this is one of the 2 original KITT cars that we, the Knight Rider historians, own. It's a 1984 Firebird, not a Trans Am, and is only one of 2 known 1984 models used for the show. It's also only one of 2 hardtop cars ever used for the show. It was originally red with a light gray interior, which looked something like this from the factory. We first see this car in Season 3's 10-Wheel Trouble for a very brief scene where Sally Flynn runs away from Michael. But it appears again in the next episode produced, Night Strike, for perhaps its most famous scene. As the antagonists are trying to shoot KITT with a laser, we see KITT dodging laser explosions. Because sure, lasers create large fireballs in the dirt, right? This scene was so well done that it ended up in the Season 4 opening theme, and it also was reused in the Season 4 episode Sky Knight. The car was then heavily used in Night of the Juggernaut as the KITT that the car thieves wanted to steal, as well as the KITT being chased by the Juggernaut. Another interesting thing to note about this car, even though it only appeared in 9 episodes, it actually had 3 different front noses on it. For 10-Wheel Trouble and Night Strike, it had a Season 3 style nose. During the hiatus between seasons, George Barris designed an all-new front nose for all the KITTs, more angular and without the indents in the front for where the turn signals would be. However, this car received a prototype nose never seen on another KITT car. It was Barris's newly designed 4th season angular nose, but with turn signal indents. It kept this special one-off nose through the filming of Juggernaut, Out of the Woods, Burial Ground, Kidnap, and Sky Knight. 2 weeks later, the car was used in the filming of The Wrong Crowd, where the front nose was replaced again, this time with the standard Season 4 nose. And no, they didn't just fill in the turn signal indents. Trust me, I checked. After The Wrong Crowd, the car appeared in one last Season 4 episode, Fright Night, where KITT darkened his windows because he was wearing his shades in Hollywood. In fact, most of the times you see KITT in Season 4, most of them, whenever you see KITT with his darkened windows, it's this car. After the show ended, this car had an equally exciting life, spending 6 months at the World Expo in Australia before appearing as one of 2 cars at the Universal Studios theme park for the next 6 years. For a more detailed history of this particular car, check out a video we did specifically on this car. There's a link in the top right hand corner of this video right now. Suffice it to say, this car survives and thrives to this day. We are going back to the beginning with this next kit. Car number 15, as we call it, coincidentally used in 15 episodes in the first season of the show. This is the original general-purpose T-top stunt car that you may have heard me talking about during most of our Season 1 commentary videos. This is one of the 3 1982 Trans Ams procured for the pilot by series creator Glenn A. Larson. It was a fully decked out black Trans Am with gold accents and camel tan interior. Here's a fun fact. We have the General Motors invoices for all 3 of the original TAs secured for the pilot, and all 3 were 100% identical in every detail. Color, trim, options, everything. Their invoices match down to the cent. This 1982 was a WS6 car, power locks, windows, seat, rear hatch release, cruise control, air conditioning, cargo security screen, luggage compartment trim, and more. This TA obviously first appeared in the pilot and was used for most of the stunts at the Demolition Derby, to include the oil slick gag and Kitt's first ski mode ever. It also famously did the 360s when the car thief stole it from Michael. It's also the car used in one of Kitt's most famous scenes from the pilot, when he self-activates in the Comtron garage to spring Michael from jail. It was used in every episode through A Nice and Decent Little Town, well, except for the Topaz connection, it wasn't used there, before it mysteriously disappeared. In fact, the last time we see it, the car stops Ron Austin when his car flips over at the end of A Nice and Decent Little Town. So as you can see in these photos, the car was stripped of any usable parts. Remember, at this point in the series, Trans Ams were still not too plentiful for the studio, so they needed to save whatever they could. Once stripped, the shell of the car was destroyed. Definitely a sad ending for one of the original 3 kits, but fortunately, the other 2 survive. Alright, so technically this next kit car isn't a Trans Am. It isn't even a car, really. Yes, we're talking about the Flivver car. The what, I heard you say? Well, let me explain. As a way to help preserve the very few Trans Ams the show had when it was first getting started, the Knight Rider crew built the Flivver car, Flivver, a dune buggy chassis with a Trans Am rubber or fiberglass body shell on top. This Flivver car, powered by a Volkswagen engine, was mainly used for turbo boosts, but occasionally did some other stunt work as well. We did a complete, in-depth video on this car a while back. There's a link in the corner of this video right now if you want to check out that video, where we go over the complete history of that car, every appearance in the series, and what happened to it. The Flivver car makes its first appearance in the pilot, when Michael and Kitt jump over some stalled cars at the Demolition Derby. The Flivver went on to appear in 16 more episodes, mostly in seasons 1 and 2. It didn't appear at all in season 3, but did reappear a couple times in the final season, with its final appearance being in The Scent of Roses. When the show ended, the car was not destroyed, and we can even see it for sale in this photo from 1988. Well, at least the chassis. At this point, the shell had been removed from the chassis. But we do know at least one shell survived into this millennium, so we're going to call this car a survivor, even though its current whereabouts are currently unknown. Car number 17. Car 17 is the only kit to never receive the normal exterior kit conversion. This car was the Season 4 insert car, Season 4 only. This car was used anytime they filmed the actors inside of kit. It made its debut in the Season 4 premiere, Night of the Juggernaut, and was used in all 21 episodes of this season. It was never used prior to Season 4. So this was actually a 1984 Trans Am, one of only 2 1984 models used on the show. Since its sole purpose was to be an insert car, the Knight Rider crew never converted the outside to kit, opting to keep its factory black and gold exterior, original taillights without the blackout, original front nose. Although they did swap in the 15-inch TurboCast kit rims. Those 15-inch rims were not available on 1984 Trans Ams. Now the 14-inch were, but these are 15-inch that the car had. It was also the only kit car to have locking T-tops. Details on this car's configuration from the factory are pretty scarce. We don't have really much to go on. We don't have a VIN of this car yet. But we do know that even though this was not a train wreck car, and this car wasn't even configured to look like KITT, it still unfortunately was crushed when the show ended. Car number 18. This is one of the many T-top stunt cars the show had over the course of its run. But this particular car appeared in quite a few episodes over seasons 3 and 4. First introduced in Night of the Drones, this 1983 Trans Am, pulled from the train derailment, remains a mystery in terms of its original factory specs, despite its frequent appearances in the show. Well, we do know it had T-tops and a rear defrost, but really that's about it. This kit did most of the skiing in the later half of the series, and even a couple turbo boosts, like this one from Junkyard Dog, which by the way blew out both of its front tires. By season 4, all of the Knight Rider cars had their front noses converted over to the new, more angular front nose designed by George Barris. Well, all except this car and one other. This car also had a defect in its overhead console, where you can see some of the tan headliner peeking out towards the center. This car's final scene comes in the series finale Voodoo Night, where Donald Crane attempts to escape from KITT. This car, despite its heavy use in the series, was destroyed when the show ended. Car number 19 had quite an eventful life before, during, and after the show ended. Within days of its quote-unquote birth, this car was yet another train derailment victim, before being pressed into duty on Knight Rider. However, this particular car didn't debut until season 3, while a lot of its train derailment siblings first appeared a year prior. This car was the insert car for season 3, and season 3 only. Now, if you were paying attention a bit ago in this video, you'll remember us talking about the season 4 insert car, and how the insert cars were used to film the actors inside of KITT, all the while KITT is being towed by a camera truck. This particular car is unique in that it was the only car out of the entire fleet to actually have a working auto roof. Yes, both the left and right side T-tops could mechanically open. How cool is that? We only see this neat feature a couple of times on the series, namely in Knights of the Fastlane and in Night in Disgrace. When season 3 concluded and prep work was beginning on season 4, this car's role radically changed. It ceased being an insert car and was converted into the full-time Super Pursuit Mode car. Our guess is that they wanted a new insert car, as this one didn't really have a good fit and finish to it to warrant the up-close shots that were required of this car. And the roof had a pretty annoying leak at the time anytime it rained. In fact, in some episodes you can see that they pulled out the overhead console buttons and shoved a towel in there to soak up the water. It became the perfect candidate for the then new Super Pursuit Mode car. This car appeared in every episode of season 3 and 13 episodes of season 4 before, yes, being crushed by a wrecking ball when the show ended. Alright, and we arrive at the one, the only, roll-caged acrylic windowed jump car. Well, was it really the one and only? No, it was not. Car number 20, as we're calling it. This is the only special purpose car in the fleet to ever consist of multiple Trans Ams. So let me explain. This car first appeared in the pilot in 2 brief scenes, one in the Demolition Derby and the other when KITT jumps over some stalled cars while giving the car thieves, Jackson and Brown, a run for their money. This original car was a 1982 Trans Am that had all of its glass removed and replaced with acrylics. The T-tops were removed and a steel roof was welded in place, along with a heavy-duty roll cage. Now, as you can imagine, this car received more abuse than any other Trans Am in the fleet. so it probably won't come as a surprise to learn that while they only had one roll-caged jump car at any given time, this Trans Am didn't last the entire span of the show. Once this car was unsalvageable, it was scrapped and another Trans Am was modified and took its place as the roll-cage jump car. We do know that the last Trans Am used for this special purpose car was one of the 1983 Trainwreck TAs. What we don't know is if there were more Trans Ams between the first 1982 jump car and the last 1983 jump car. The fate of all these cars used for this jump car were the same. They were all destroyed. The last one was crushed by a wrecking ball, but it didn't give up the fight very easily. Rumor has it that the wrecking ball had a hard time crushing the roll cage, so they had to lay a big steel plate on the roof of the car and then hit it with a wrecking ball to really finish it off. The only known part to survive from this car is actually in our collection right now, the scanner bar. If you're interested in learning more about that, check out our video on the scanner bar, the story behind it. It's really fascinating. There's a link in the corner of this video right now. All right, can you believe it? We're down to the final 5 kits used in the show. Now, these 5 were the most used out of any of the kit cars in the series. So we're at car 21. This car is the Season 3 and Season 4 hero car, but this particular car's origins date to much, much earlier. You see, this 1982 Trans Am was the first car that the studio purchased outright from a dealer immediately after Robert Foster took over as executive producer and showrunner. Remember, Foster came in after the first half of the first season was done. He took over from Glenn A. Larson. By that point in the series, they only had 4 Trans Ams and the Flivver car, so they desperately needed more cars. So this particular car, a black and gold Trans Am with a tan leather interior, made its first appearance in Season 1's Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death as a general purpose stunt car, and only appeared in 2 more Season 1 episodes. And if you look closely, you can actually see the leather PMD seats, which is really cool. It was also absent for a good portion of Season 2 before being put to full-time work in Season 3 as the show's new hero car. Now, story-wise, KITT received a new dashboard, and while many think it would make sense to simply upgrade the existing hero car, the Knight Rider crew instead decided to build an all-new hero car. This car would go on to appear in every single episode in Seasons 3 and 4. When the show ended, and because this car was owned by the studio, it was spared a grisly demise under the wrecking ball and was allowed to survive. It is currently in a private collection outside of the USA. In fact, this is the only original car out of the 5 that is not in the United States. And many of its original interior bits have been replaced with replica parts over the years, unfortunately. We had the opportunity to see this car in person a number of years ago. In fact, we've thoroughly seen, photographed, and documented all of the surviving cars. But we did have a chance to see this car a number of years ago, and it was just a really neat experience. The start of our final 4 is actually one of the first 3. Car number 22 is the second of our 3 original cars used for the pilot. As you maybe have guessed, this one started life as a 1982 black and gold Trans Am with tan interior and was heavily used in the first 2 seasons of the show. And you know what? I bet this was the very first KITT car you ever saw on TV. Whether you first watched the show on a small CRT television in your parents' wood-paneled covered den in 1982, or on your cell phone while sitting on the toilet in 2022. We've come so far, haven't we? During the opening seconds of the theme song, this is the Trans Am you see racing toward you in the desert. So technically, this car was seen in every episode of the series, right? For Season 1, this car's main role was that of a sort of backup to the hero car. It was treated better than the dedicated stunt car they had at the time, but not quite as nice as the full-on hero car. For Season 2, this car's role changed as it became the dedicated insert car. used for close-up shots of the actors while filming inside of KITT. This car also has the distinction of being one of 2 cars outfitted with the high-traction drop-downs for the Season 2 episode Speed Demons. We see this car a few times in the early Season 3 episodes. Most notably, it played Car during the scenes in KITT vs. Car, where Car is buried in the sand. How many times can I say car in one sentence? Anyways, after these early Season 3 episodes, Car 22 was barely used for the remainder of the season. For the Season 4 premiere, Night of the Juggernaut, this car was partially disassembled and painted primer gray to portray KITT during his reconstruction phase after his run-in with the Juggernaut. This car's final appearance in the series came during the late Season 4 episode, Hills of Fire, where, with its high-traction drop-downs engaged, blocks the bad guy's truck, causing it to flip over. So, what is the fate of this car? Believe it or not, this is one of the 5 surviving KITT cars, and we own it. This is the very same car we've owned since 2007. As of the recording of this video, this KITT can be seen in the Peterson Automotive Museum in Los Angeles, California. Appearing in 54 episodes, our 3rd most used Trans Am in Knight Rider is Car 23, the left-hand blind drive car. This 1983 Trans Am, yes, once again from the train wreck, was first on set for the first episode filmed for Season 2, Return to Cadiz. But viewers first saw it in the Season 2 premiere, Goliath. When first constructed, this car had a fake Knight Rider dash shell in it, with a telescoping steering wheel and a long ratchet-style shifter to allow the stuntmen behind the driver's seat to be able to easily reach the controls. They also relocated switches such as the headlights, fog lights, and brake line lock to within easy reach of the stuntmen. This was the very first dedicated blind drive car that the show had. Prior to this car's arrival, the stunt crew would simply place a blind drive seat in whatever Trans Am they had available at the time. When Season 3 rolled around and the show built an all-new Hero car with a new dashboard, the old Hero car's dashboard was no longer needed. You'll see what happened to the old Hero car here in a few minutes. The old Hero car's dash was removed and placed into this left-hand blind drive car. Anytime you see the old 2TV dashboard in KITT in Seasons 3 and 4, well, with the exception of KITT vs. Car and Lost Night, but anytime you see that dashboard, you're actually looking at the left-hand blind drive car. At some point, the crew cut off the pods from the dash, probably because they were in the way. When the show ended, this car was crushed since it was a train wreck car. However, we do know that the blind drive seat was removed before the car was crushed, but its whereabouts today are unknown. As for the original Hero dash that was in this car, was it crushed along with the car? That's a mystery we have yet to solve, but the car itself no longer exists. And the runner-up to our list of Knight Rider cars by order of least appearances to most is Car 24, appearing in 64 episodes. This is what we call the original hardtop stunt car. This is one of the first cars acquired by the studio after the original pilot cars, and was desperately needed. There's some mystery surrounding its year, but most signs point to it being a 1982 model and not an 83 from the train wreck. If it is an 83, we think it's an 83 prior to the train wreck. It's one of only 3 hardtop cars that the show had during its run. We first see the car in a few easy drive-by scenes in Chariot of Gold, but its life over the years during which the show was filmed would never be this easy. We call this car the hardest working Trans Am in the fleet, and for good reason. It was bashed and crashed, jumped and spun around, yet survived until the very end of the series and beyond. The last time we see this car on screen is at the end of Knight Rider's penultimate episode, Night of the Rising Sun. Michael and Kit are chasing Tanika and stop him by cutting his car off in a flooded road. While this car had an interesting history on the show, its life after the show was not without some interest and mystery in and of itself. You see, this car sat outside the Universal Studios Transportation Department in their parking lot until at least the summer of 1988. Visitors on the studio tram tours would frequently drive past this very car, snapping photos of it until it mysteriously disappeared one day. What's more interesting is that the Knight Rider cars doomed for the Crusher were destroyed in 1987, a full year and a half before this car disappeared. So, that begs the question, is it still out there? If there's any original kit left out in the wild and unaccounted for, it is this one. We did an entire video on this particular car. There's a link to that video in the corner if you want to check it out. Its current status, unknown. And drumroll please, coming in at a whopping 77 episodes out of the total 84 episodes produced. The Knight Rider car used the most during the show's run is car number 25, the original Seasons 1 and 2 hero car, which later would become the right-hand blind drive car. This 1982 Trans Am is our final of the 3 original pilot cars secured at the very start of the series filming. During Season 1, this car actually pulled double duty. It was not only the hero car, but it was also the main insert car. This car was babied as much as a screen-used kit could be, rarely being used for anything more than a light burnout. By Season 2, the car was still the hero car, but no longer the insert car, as they had another Trans Am for that job, one we covered just a few cars back. A few episodes into Season 2's production, this car received an all-new dashboard shell and electronics. It appeared in every Season 1 and 2 episode. By Season 3, the show had a new hero car, which we also covered earlier in this video, so this hero car was no longer needed in that particular role. The car was sent to George Barris, where the hero dash was removed and placed in the left-hand blind drive car. Again, we just covered that. And this car was converted into the right-hand blind drive car. The factory dash underneath the Knight Rider dash was hacked up. A secondary steering wheel was added to the passenger side, with chains and sprockets connecting it to the factory column on the driver's side. Brake and throttle pedals were also added to the passenger side floor, tied into the car's OEM controls. This car, now the right-hand blind drive car, would go on to appear in the majority of Season 3 and Season 4, its last appearance in Night of 1,000 Devils. After the show, this car's blind drive apparatus was removed, and the interior was retrofitted with a replica dash and other parts. It was on display in a museum in Indiana for decades before being sold fairly recently, and is now privately owned in California and on loan to a museum, where it's currently on display. And there you have it. Over an hour of me talking about Pontiacs. Can you believe it? As I said at the start, I'm sure there are some minor errors to our list, especially with those mysterious early second season cars. As we continue to collect call sheets and production notes for those episodes, some of that mystery will be lifted. As always, thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, share it with your friends. Hopefully they'll like it too. Thanks. We'll talk to you soon.